Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here, back with your daily DEFCON update. A lot has transpired in the last 48 hours, so let's just break it down. There are 4 main points of escalation that have prompted the Looking Glass airplane, which is the national command post for the Strategic Nuclear Forces of the United States. This is what goes up in such case the ground-based relay systems are destroyed. Okay, this is what you put up in the air when the DEFCON transcends to a new level. This thing went up, I think 2 days ago, went over the Atlantic, turned its transponders off. Now, there are 4 main reasons why this has occurred. Obviously, the reason why it's occurred is because of all the nuclear saber rattling going on in the world, the offensive in Kherson, the annexation of 4 territories, and the threats of Russian retaliation for Ukrainian attacks on what it now deems its territory. The main reasons are as follows. There was a redeployment of strategic nuclear bombers Tu-160 and Tu-95 to the border of Finland. These bombers are, of course, capable of carrying nuclear missiles. Now, typically, this posturing is done out in the open so that the other side can see. It's an obvious flex. The purpose is to send an obvious message. They're not trying to be secretive about it. They're trying to put NATO on notice that our nuclear forces are not necessarily mobilizing, but capable of mobilizing, which kind of puts you somewhere in between DEFCON 3 and DEFCON 2. There are MiG-31s with Kinzhal missiles, which are hypersonic missiles that could have nuclear tips stationed in Kaliningrad. This, of course, is the exclave of Russia that is on the Baltic Sea, that will be a launching pad for nuclear weapons should the shizzy hit the fizzy. We have video documentation of Iskander systems, 17 to be exact, that were sent to Kherson. These are short-range ballistic missiles that can, of course, have nuclear tips and cause massive devastation. The question is, are they going to be used for that purpose? Nobody knows, but a lot of this posturing is likely, once again, just to put NATO on notice that Russia is starting to ratchet up its nuclear level of readiness. We also have the K-329 Belgorod, which is out to sea. Apparently, it's been lost on radar, although I'm not so convinced about that. I don't think the military would. Maybe the military wants to let on that they don't know where it is, but maybe they're still able to track it somehow. I don't know. Anyways, the official word on the street is that this Belgorod, which is a new submarine that the Russians just made. It's a nuclear-powered submarine, about 200 meters long. It holds 6 Poseidon self-propelled nuclear missiles. Okay, so get this. This is a nuclear-powered submarine that contains 6 nuclear-powered drones that have nuclear warheads on each one of them. Each nuclear warhead can potentially be up to 100 megatons. That's twice megatons, did I say? Megatons. Each nuclear warhead, of course, is twice the size of the Tsar Bomba, theoretically. Okay, I'm not saying that each of them are outfitted with nuclear weapons right now, even although I'm presuming there's probably something going on there. Maybe not to the 100 megatonnage that is theoretically possible on this delivery system. Now, the reason why this is so unique and why this is so different is because, number one, we were talking about this months ago. Everybody said it was theoretical. We were talking about it quite often. Even the US government thought it was theoretical, but now they're not saying it's theoretical. This thing can travel 10,000 kilometers underwater, virtually undetected, unlike a intercontinental ballistic missile that can be detected by satellites, by radar, by various mechanisms. This cannot be detected, and because it's a nuclear-powered nuclear weapon that travels underwater, it can basically travel up to 10,000 kilometers, basically able to target any coastal city or coastline, because one of these things would likely decimate the eastern seaboard. Never mind decimate, it would annihilate. It would create a tsunami that would annihilate the eastern seaboard. Twice the Tsar Bomba is thousands of times what the bomb of Hiroshima was capable of doing. It would create a nuclear tsunami that would likely wipe the UK, any coastal city, just off the map. Okay, and these are the main reasons why Looking Glass is now up in the air, why the US government and the Pentagon are likely taking this threat a little bit more seriously, as of course fears that a low-yield tactical nuclear weapon could be used in response to the Ukraine's seemingly, what would you call it? I wouldn't say necessarily successful, but progressive offensive, in that they're losing a lot of forces in doing this offensive. It's coming at a very high cost in terms of their manpower and their equipment that they're using. Nonetheless, they're breaking through Russian defenses obviously in the Kharkiv region, in the Donbass region, and to some extent now in Kherson region, which is basically, with the exception of Zaporozhye, the whole 9 yards, okay? Now, a lot of people are thinking, and myself included, that clearly the Russians are preparing for a major counter-offensive, if you will, which is why they are just sort of corralling their forces. At this point, it seems they are retreating to more fortifiable and defendable positions, and it appears as though they're planning for some large-scale shock-and-awe type offensive, which is probably going to take place come the first snowfall if there is not a deal that has been reached. Now, I guess the only hope in this situation is that Zelensky is going to say to himself, okay, we're going to make some progress, and then we're going to try to go back to the negotiating table. However, the Duma has ratified the annexation of these 4 territories. It's a go, basically, so there's no going back on that. So unofficially or officially, depending on how you want to look at it, Ukraine is now inside Russian territory, according to the Russians now, don't shoot the messenger, with a bunch of tanks and weapons and guns and trying to kill Russians. That, therefore, would be a declaration of war. So, guys, the all-out declaration of war is coming. This is why, if this counter-offensive is unsuccessful, which a lot of people are doubting that it will be. They think a lot of this is kind of hype right now to kind of boost the morale of the Ukraine military. You know, like I say, I got no dog in this fight. I mean, either way, it's nuclear Armageddon, I suppose. So, you know, I suppose if you're holding US dollars and the petrodollar tanks because NATO loses the war, then yeah, that's really going to royally suck. So, of course, that's one of the many reasons why the U.S. has to win this war, why it must be existential for them. Aside from all of the shady things that have gone on in that country for many years that we're not really going to get into. So that's what we're looking at here. We're looking at a situation where we're on the cusp of a major escalation. We have former general and director of the CIA, David Petraeus, saying that if Russia detonates a tactical nuclear warhead in Ukraine, then we will respond with conventional weapons, which of course would prompt a more unconventional response from the Russians, which likely would prompt a non-conventional response, i.e. nuclear response from us, and then things just escalate in a tit-for-tat situation from there, which is why I had a subscriber send me a message that apparently on Alibaba or AliExpress, and I had to go and check this out myself, they aren't selling potassium iodide tablets anymore. Now, if you guys know, back a few months ago, we did a video with Dr. Bones where he showed you how you can actually use potassium, is it iodine? You can use iodine in order to derive the same effects that you would from potassium iodide tablets. However, the only FDA approved is the Thyrosafe brand, okay? And we get this stuff from the company, and every time a big shipment comes in, the government buys up like 90% of it for some reason, and we get sent the rest. So we have a few thousand in stock. They basically flew off the shelves the last time we put them up, and apparently China is not parting ways with this stuff anymore for whatever reason. Perhaps they're preparing for the same thing. They too have warned of grave consequences if Ukraine joins NATO. Now, the likelihood of Ukraine joining NATO is very, very slim. For starters, they don't fulfill all the criteria. They're currently in a war. Every single member of NATO would have to approve it. And then, of course, even once approved, there's a lengthy process that they have to ensue from there. However, China has warned that this will lead to all-out nuclear war if they join NATO, because that, of course, would evoke Article 5, because Russia would then be in a conflict with Article 5. Now, there have been other talks of maybe not incorporating them into NATO, but we're hearing talks again of potential security guarantees from NATO for Ukraine, potential no-fly zones. Once again, we know that old Joe said that that would lead to World War III, so he's aware of that much. And we know that the United States and NATO take the Russian threat seriously. They know it's not a bluff, which is why they are not in there in the first place. But China is preparing for something as well, and their country is not doing so hot right now. Actually, it's too hot, which is part of the problem. I'll talk about that in just a minute. But on the North Korean front, we also have Japanese, I guess you'd call them like villages, were advised to seek shelter after North Korea has tested another ballistic missile. I think this is like the fifth one in the last 2 weeks. So they are preparing for something. They also have declared that they have their own dead hand system, that if Kim Jong-un is taken out, then all the missiles fly. Okay, we have Jeffrey Sachs, who was on Bloomberg TV. He did an interview. He was a professor at University of Columbia. He is fairly well known and is fairly active in the mainstream media. And he had something to say that they really didn't like too much, and that was that he suggested that the U.S. probably sabotaged the Nord Stream pipeline, and that the prospect of nuclear escalation as a result of that was incredibly high, or in the very least, some retaliation on our critical infrastructure. Now, in terms of Nord Stream, the Russians are saying we can fix it, possibly. It would come at a very high cost, and it would take a long time to do. And then, of course, once again, you run into the problem of who's going to want to insure this product or this project, who is going to want to put their faith in this sort of thing. But I guess what they're saying is that there still is a possibility for Europe to get cheap Russian gas through Nord Stream in the future. But I personally think that if this was not done by the Russians, and this wasn't some self-sabotage in order to, I don't know, drum up fear or force Europeans to the negotiating table, whatever sort of twisted logic they're throwing out there, then if we've committed, if we actually did this, then there's a good chance that if they repair it, we're just going to do it all again. And of course, the big war is about to start in 1 month's time, which is why NATO's nuclear plane, I should say United States nuclear plane, is on high alert right now. I'm not sure if I talked about this, but the Russian Foreign Ministry's director, Vladimir Gurmakov, has warned the United States that there is a perimeter plan that is in place, and just kind of reminded them of the Russian dead hand system, which would basically have all of the Russians' nuclear arsenal, or whatever remained, if the United States initiated a nuclear strike on Russian facilities, then this dead hand system would mean that even if the centralized command of the Russian Federation was wiped off the map, that whatever missiles remained would still fire, wreaking havoc across the planet. So that was a direct threat from Vladimir Gurmakov. Now, in that David Petraeus interview, something I didn't mention yesterday, David Petraeus, former CIA director, former general, he said, and of course he's not speaking officially at the behest of the US government, but I think he kind of unofficially is. He basically said that if a tactical nuke was detonated in Ukraine, then the radioactive fallout could be construed as an attack on NATO if that radioactive fallout spread to, say, Poland. So, if Russia uses a low-yield tactical nuke, the radioactive fallout affects Poland or something like that, that could be construed then as an attack on NATO, which of course would allow them to evoke Article 5 and potentially bring the full force of NATO to bear, bringing us to the edge of human extinction, of course. The Ukrainian commander now believes that Putin wants to take all of Kiev. There has been more concentration of forces in Belarus, all in line with the current mobilization. We told you yesterday that I can't remember what his name was, but you're going to have to go back to the video. There's so many Russian names, I can't keep them all in my head. But he's a member of the Russian Duma, and he basically said that the end game is to completely, not only demilitarize Ukraine, but to destroy the Ukrainian military. Of course, in order to do that, they're going to have to likely take over the entire country. They're definitely going for Odessa, which is a predominantly Russian-speaking country. And anywhere else that is predominantly Russian-speaking, they're going to go for it. So prepare for that. Now, China's drought is still a problem. Okay, this is impacting 900 million people, threatens food and energy security. Their largest freshwater lake and other areas of the Yangtze River have seen massive declining water levels. So this global drought, heat wave stuff still ongoing, overshadowed, of course, by the threats of nuclear Armageddon, but still a problem nonetheless. And this would partly explain why China's been stockpiling so much grain. Then, of course, you have the deindustrialization of Europe, the higher prices of fertilizer. Guys, 2023 is just fitting to be a disastrous year of famine, hyperinflation, and probably skyrocketing gas and oil prices once this Russian oil price cap goes through. I just don't think we've seen anything yet. So unfortunately, I don't have any positive news for you. The markets did their little dead cat bounce thing after a week of insanity and chaos, but there's still a long way to go down. That's for sure. We also have this bird flu situation that is still there and is still a very big problem. Now, interestingly, in past years, outbreaks of avian flu declined with warmer weather and the end of migration by wild birds in the autumn and winter. However, these current outbreaks have continued across the UK and elsewhere in Europe, leading to fears that the highly pathogenic variants of avian flu are now endemic in wild birds, creating an infection risk all year round. Now, will this have the same effect as, the spread of the virus that we just seen, in that it is diminished over time, in that it becomes more prevalent but less deadly? That would be the ideal. However, with greater prevalence comes the greater risk that it comes into contact with humans and potentially a strain which is transmissible within humans. So it seems like this is going to be the next thing. This is the big fear that people have been fearing for 20 odd years, is bird flu. So from June to September, the number of outbreaks in domesticated birds was more than 5 times higher than the same period last year. 5 times higher. Experts say all kinds of bird species have become infected now, causing the virus to remain. So that's gonna blow up right around the time, probably right after the bombs drop. It's gonna be something out of the Bible. I think we're looking at a situation where, during nuclear winter, we're gonna get hit by this devastating bird flu pandemic or something like that. I think I talked about how the Russians have now ratified the agreements about the new territory, so that is now almost official. I think there's one more step before it's officially recognized as the Russian territory. Once that happens, guys, it's on. So I'm not putting too much faith in these Ukrainian offensives right now. I think they're definitely making progress, and you got the Chechen leader wanting to send his kids to fight on the front lines, talking trash about all of the Russian generals, that they need to be sent there barefoot with no gun or something like that. I can't remember exactly what he said, but he's been lambasting the generals and putting them on blast because he thinks that they're doing a bad job. However, we don't know what the end game here is. I think that they're preparing some massive shock and awe campaign, which is going to blindside a lot of people. They're not sending all of these troops and weapons there for nothing. They're planning something, and I think the type of war that we've been accustomed to with respect to how Russia's been fighting it so far, we're not going to see that. I think once they declare war, it's going to look a lot different, and the world is going to be stunned, and Zelensky may well be out of there on an airplane taking Biden up on his offer to get out of there. But who knows? Maybe the captain will go down with his ship and he'll be a martyr. But here's the thing, guys. If the Ukrainian offensive is successful, then all of this Russian strategic nuclear mobilization is deadly serious. So either way, we're kind of damned if we do or we're damned if we don't. There really is no light at the end of the tunnel here. Elon Musk, I don't know if jokingly or not, had suggested that Ukraine give back Crimea and that maybe the 4 annexed territories are left to be independent but not part of Russia or Ukraine or something to that effect. And Zelensky kind of scoffed at that. Remember, Musk, Starlink has helped Ukraine. So he's definitely a proponent of the Ukrainian people. He wants to minimize the amount of casualties, hopefully on either side. But of course, that idea was shot down. And I'm sure Elon Musk is now on the list, on the hit list. UK is going to be facing blackouts, as is much of Europe. So guys, make sure you get your wood stoves. And I'm going to be doing a video on this in the near future. Now, I think that you're going to have government regulations put into place in many European countries with respect to how much firewood you're able to harvest. And as such, if you're relying on a chainsaw that is very loud, don't be surprised if you draw the attention of the authorities. Now, I would not advise anybody to do anything illegal ever on this channel. But I would say that Silky Saws are very quiet and they're very sharp, and they don't require sharpening because they have impulse hardened teeth. Do I have one? Oh, look at this. I have one right here. This is the good old, this is the Katana Boy 650. This thing will help us deforest what remains of the carbon sinks of the world. That's a joke for all the environmentalists out there, okay? This thing goes through wood like butter. That's what you might be left with in order to get firewood, especially as the price of gasoline gets way too high. So consider that you're going to need a means to procure firewood, and staying warm is really half the battle in winter. What else do we got for you guys today? I got a message that wasn't, I couldn't translate it properly, but apparently Norway has put some sort of special force of 4,000 police or like National Guard on guard because of the Nord Stream issue to defend critical infrastructure. So there are concerns that the attacks on critical infrastructure could very well spread. What else do we got for you guys? We talked about the bombers in Finland. We talked about that. Okay, I think that's about it. All you need to know is shit's bad. It's going to get worse, and you should keep on prepping for it. Like I say, we did get our monthly installment of Thyrosafe in, the only FDA-approved potassium iodate tablet. Of course, you would take this if there ever was a nuclear incident to prevent your hair from falling out and dying a slow, painful death from the cancers that might ensue by ingestion through the thyroid of the radiation. Now, hopefully, I mean, if it comes to that, like, we're all pretty screwed. But the fact of the matter is that hundreds of millions, if not billions of people would survive. And, I guess, do you want to survive well, or do you want to, just be suffering endlessly? So, I mean, let's hope that cooler heads prevail, but I really don't know at this point, guys. I really don't know if our leadership is as smart as I originally at one point thought. I'm hoping that they are. I'm hoping that this is the time when you hope that there's an Illuminati up there that is pulling all the strings and is just kind of, putting on this show. And at the very end, they're going to say, okay, it was all just a show, right? We're not really going to push the button. But I don't know, man. The way things are going, it is escalating fast. We are at the highest risk of nuclear war than we have ever been before. That is absolutely insane. And it's showing no signs of abating. It's only getting worse. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. Thanks for watching. Canadian Prepper out.